And get started. So, good evening. I welcome to the Zen Center. I see some familiar faces here and online also. And I also know that there's a new face here, at least one person that's first time here. Welcome. My name is Randy Wedin. I'm a lay teacher here at the Zen Center. And the title of the talk this evening is From A to Z, from awe to Zen. So awe is A-W-E, awe. And so how many of you have been out in nature and you've seen a really beautiful vista and you've just gone, whoa. Or you've heard a powerful piece of music and it's just sent shivers down your spine. Or maybe you've seen this unexpected act of kindness or generosity and it's brought tears to your eyes. So if you've seen any of those things have happened to you, that's an experience of awe. And so before I tell you a little bit about why I'm going to be talking about awe and Zen, let me define what I mean by the word awe. And this is a definition that people are using for the word awe. Awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. So let me repeat that. Awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. Now, awe is not a word that you hear very much in Zen circles, but I think it's a word that deserves more attention from us in the Zen world. Yeah, you don't find it in the sutras, sort of the Buddhist scriptures, you might say. You won't find it on all those different Buddhist lists, like the 4 immeasurables or the 6 paramitas. But this evening, I'm going to try to tell you about a connection that I see between awe and Zen, and why I think we should add this word to our vocabulary. And then I'm going to give you some ideas about how you might incorporate awe into your practice and our practice. So I got interested in this topic for 2 reasons. One is because of a personal experience of awe I had last spring, and I'll tell you about that in just a second. And the second one is because I started in the online newsletters and that I read and the podcasts that I listen to, I started seeing references to something called the science of awe. There's sort of this newly emerging science of awe. And as some of you know, I'm a science geek. So that caught my attention. And I wanted to learn more about this hot topic out there that's about the science of awe, which has kind of become a hot topic in the last 20 years. It's relatively young, but a number of scientists are studying it, doing research, and finding out that awe can have a pretty profound impact on our bodies and our minds and our actions towards others. So as I was learning more about the science of awe, I started wondering, well, how might this relate to Zen? Because I like to relate Zen and science together. And I found some pretty interesting parallels. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But first, I promise to tell you about my personal experience of awe. So last April, my wife and I traveled to Texas with our small little camping trailer to witness the solar eclipse. And we went to a Texas state park about 40 miles southwest of Dallas. And this state park was in the path of totality. So we would be in there for about 3.5 minutes. And so we got situated and checked the weather forecast, and we were kind of getting worried because the forecasts were for cloudy or partly cloudy. But the morning of April 8th, we woke up and there were mostly blue skies with a little few clouds. So we kept our fingers crossed and we went to this big open field right next to this lake, and all the other campers that were there, full campground, of course, all the other campers came to this field, and there were some park visitors that came, and we all brought our special glasses that you need to wear. And some people brought small telescopes, and some people brought these really elaborate camera equipment. And we all set up, and there was this, excitement building and building and building. And of course, I knew exactly what was going to happen in a solar eclipse. I mean, I knew intellectually that it was the sun was out there, and the moon was going to come in front of it, and it would block it, and then there'd be this thing called a corona around it. So I knew that right up here. And then as the time started approaching, it kind of got dim. The daylight got dim, and people started getting more and more excited. Okay, so it's getting a little dim. And then when the moon got right in front of the sun, and you could take your special glasses off, I looked up, and I was just blown away. There was this silver kind of a bird necklace, bracelet all around the sun, very sparkly, just like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was I just didn't know what to think about it. It just got me right here. And within, just a few seconds, I found myself crying, and I was wondering, well, why am I crying? And then I started thinking about the people for the hundreds and thousands of years that have witnessed these total eclipses, and what they might have felt. And I started thinking about in particular about Aztecs and Mayans and what they might have felt. And I sort of felt a kinship with all these people. And I felt a kinship with the people that were out there around me that were going, whoa, and all that sort of stuff. And so it was really kind of a remarkable experience. And so I think it really fit the definition of awe. It was, I was in the presence of something vast, and it transcended my understanding of the world. So that was a pretty dramatic example of an awe experience. But, experiences of awe don't have to be that dramatic. I mean, I've experienced awe out there on the porch, just looking out at a sunset. And I've experienced awe when I'm hear a song that brings back powerful memories from the past, or when I'm singing in a choir, which I do. I sometimes experience awe when I'm meditating with a group of people and it's really quiet. Or when I see someone being really kind to someone. Or when I see someone stepping out of their comfort zone to display, and it displays courage. So those are examples of everyday awe. So I wanted to see if you could maybe take a minute to think about, for yourself, a personal example when you've experienced awe. So I'm going to, it could be a big experience or an everyday experience. So we're just going to take 90 seconds here. We're going to ask you to close your eyes and think about, recall an experience for yourself. I'll ask you a question and give this some thought. So take a deep breath, close your eyes. When is a time when you are in the presence of something vast and mysterious that transcended your current understanding of the world? What did you feel? Okay. And open your eyes now, and we have just a few minutes, maybe just, we'll take a little bit of time here to see if maybe a couple of you might want to share something. I'd like to hear if anybody wants to tell a little story about their own, what came to mind. Is anybody here in the room or online? Something crop up in your mind?
Randy,
Yeah.
I kept thinking we love going to Hawaii, and we were there in 2017, and we were there right when Kilauea started erupting again, and I was picturing that was, a very transcendent moment for, I think, both of us.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it was something that was, we're not used to seeing, and it was very beautiful and also representative of the power of nature. So it was definitely a very awe-inspiring scene to reimagine.
Yep, agree.
All right, pretty dramatic example of awe. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sure I could have thought of a much simpler one, but
No,
Yes. Thank you.
yeah.
I have a really
Yeah,
sad
go
one.
ahead.
Yeah, I was at the store the other day and I was chatting with this person who I didn't know.
Speak up just a little louder so they can hear you.
Oh, sure. And so I was chatting with a stranger, and he shared something very personal about his life, even though I didn't know him. And then before he left, he touched my arm, and it was just so kind and loving. And it made me realize, like, the awe of human connection that we don't usually get, especially with strangers. I mean, I was really touched by it. I've been thinking about it like every day since.
It's a great example. Everyday awe. Kind of brings a little tear to my eye. Yeah.
I got taken up in an ultralight before I got my pilot's license by a canyon runner. And he navigated the plane over a cliff, and he turned bank to float right by the side of a cliff face, and it was like you could almost touch it. And I was just overwhelmed with the beauty of nature, and that if everybody experienced this moment that I was experiencing, that the world would know peace. Just the love of nature and the mystery behind a mountain range that you would only see from a distance, that you were that close to it, like you could almost touch it just floating down the front face of a mountain range. And I thought that was just amazingly beautiful.
Neat. One more. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been traveling a lot recently, and a lot of times I like to people watch on planes. And there's this one time that there's just a newborn, with her mother, and just seeing like the baby's eyes open wide and just look around, and then I made eye contact with it. And me being a young person, I was, I don't know why. I was just, wow, like maybe I'll be a father someday or something like that. And that was really just the wonder of life and birth and all that.
Okay. Should we stop now? Well, thank you all guys for sharing. So now I'm going to kind of turn this into a dry science lecture for a second. Sorry. Because I do want to talk about the science of awe and then look at how it might relate to Zen Buddhism. And I said that this is kind of a newly emerging science, and it kind of traces back to a paper that was published in 2003 by these two scientists, two psychologists, one from UC Berkeley and one from University of Virginia. And since that time, scientists have been psychologists and neuroscientists have been doing experiments of various types with using a bunch of different techniques to learn about awe. And they've built a pretty interesting picture of how we react to awe and how it affects our bodies and our minds and our actions towards others. And a lot of these, some of these studies have been summarized in a book that was published in 2003 that I picked up a little while ago. The title of the book is Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life by Dr. Kiltner. And he's at UC Berkeley, and he's one of those two scientists that has been kind of the leaders in this field. And he's also, he co-founded an organization at UC Berkeley called the Greater Good Science Center, which is another source of where their website's been provided some of the information that I'm going to share with you. And that organization, their mission is to study the psychology, sociology, and neuroscience of well-being, and teach skills that foster a thriving, resilient, and compassionate society. So that's the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. So I'm just going to tell you about some of the research studies that have been done. So in one study, the researchers interviewed 2,600 people from all around the world. These people spoke 20 different languages, so it's a really broad group of people. And they were given the definition of awe and asked to write about a time that they experienced awe, just kind of like what you guys did here. And then the researchers collected all those information and analyzed it and tried to come up with, look for commonalities on what people experience physically and psychologically, and in what sort of scenarios they experienced awe. And so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what some of the common physical experiences were, for example. And, I mentioned that for me, when I saw the eclipse, tears came to mind for me. And that's a very common experience. Another common experience is shivers or tingles, and goosebumps. And a third common experience is these vocal expressions. Whoa, wow. And so those three physical manifestations are common across a lot of different cultures. And then they also found, the researchers found a common psychological experience that they could find in a lot of these these experiences that people wrote up. And this is where I kind of really started thinking that, hey, this sounds a little bit like Zen. And the way they described it in this book was, this common psychological response to awe is, our individual self gives way to the boundary dissolving sense of being part of something much larger. So our individual self gives way to the boundary dissolving sense of being part of something much larger. So two parts of this reminded me of some Buddhist concepts. When I read that the individual self experiences a dissolving of boundaries, reminds me of the Buddhist concept of non-self. And then when I read about a sense of being part of something much larger, that makes me think about the Buddhist concept of interdependence. And then I was reading a little bit farther in this book, and I came across a quotation that I found really even more startling. And this quotation came from the writings of Margaret Fuller, and she was a a leading figure in the American Transcendentalism movement in the 19th century, along with Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. And she had a experience of awe at the age of 21 and wrote about it. And so I'm going to read her quotation and then break it down into 3 parts and talk about that. She wrote, here's her quotation. I saw there was no self, that selfishness was all folly and the result of circumstance. That it was only because I thought self was real that I suffered. That I had only to live in the idea of the all, and all was mine. So I read that and I thought, oh, that's Buddhism. First she said, I saw there was no self. And that's a pretty direct statement of the Buddhist concept of non-self. The word in Pali is anatta, or anatman in Sanskrit. She said, I saw there was no self. Second thing she said was, it was only because I thought self was real that I suffered. And this, I think, corresponds to the second truth of the Four Noble Truths, where it says that the cause of suffering is clinging and attachment. The clinging and attachment that our illusory self has to greed, hatred, and illusion. And that is, if you attend one of the intro classes, our first intro class, you'll learn about that. And her third statement was, I had only to live in the idea of the all, and all was mine. And that's an expression of the Buddhist concept of interdependence. Now, there's a famous passage that makes these same points that by Eihai Dogen, who's a 13th century Japanese monk. That Dogen was the founder of Soto Zen, which is the school of Zen that we practice here at the Zen Center. And Dogen said, to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be enlightened by all things in the universe, which I think is really the same thing. And if you attend the third of our intro classes, we talk about that passage. So, that really got me thinking that, yeah, this awe experience and Zen Buddhism have a lot in common. And so, from a psychological standpoint, so then I told you a little bit about the physical response to awe, the psychological response to awe. Then there's the question about what about our response to others? What do we do after we experience awe? And researchers have studied that, and they've discovered that people that have experienced awe are more likely to show pro-social behaviors. That's the way words they use to describe here. And for example, they're more likely to volunteer their time to help others. In one experiment, for example, volunteers are given points or money, and they're asked how much they would donate to charities. And the group that experienced awe recently gave more points or money than the control group. And other experiment studies show that the people that experienced awe recently were more likely to assist those in need, more likely to display cooperation in groups, and to show diminished prejudice. So just a lot of studies showing lots of other benefits, things like reduced inflammation in our immune systems, reduced depression, greater patience, greater happiness. So the list goes on and on. That's why he says how to can transform your life. So that sounds pretty grandiose, but there are, you know, it's kind of moving in that direction. So if I had more time, I could tell you another thing this book talks about is what the scenarios in which people experience awe. And they categorize it into 8 different types of settings. One of them, not surprising at all, is nature. Okay. A second one is music. Maybe that's not too surprising either. And a third one is a category they use the words moral beauty, which is when you see the human spirit, when you see exceptional virtue or character or kindness or courage. And it turns out that that is the most common scenario in which people experience awe. And you gave us an example of that in the grocery store. And so when I thought about that a little bit, I thought, well, this moral beauty, that's kind of like what we call a bodhisattva in our when we talk about someone that's in our Mahayana tradition. So that's another parallel with Buddhism. So when I got to this stage, I started wondering, well, are people that practice meditation regularly more likely to experience awe? That was, you know, kind of a hypothesis I had. And are there studies out there that show that? And there were some studies that showed that. There's studies that show that the personality types that are more likely to experience awe are people that are more open, more curious. Those are the types of people that are more likely to experience awe. And then I started thinking, well, how does that line up with Zen? And I thought about, we have this idea of beginner's mind, which refers to approaching experiences with an attitude of openness and eagerness and curiosity and a lack of preconceptions. And a few weeks ago, the Tuesday talk was about beginner's mind. And another concept in Buddhism is not knowing mind, which is related to embracing uncertainty and being present in the moment and letting go of fixed views. And a few weeks ago, there was a talk here about not knowing mind. So I think it's another example of how these two things fit together pretty well. So I just want to give you a couple of ideas about practices that you might think about how you could, that I've come across in my reading about things you can do practices you can do to incorporate, to bring awe into your life off the cushion, to incorporate it into your practice when you step off the cushion. So one of them is to keep an awe journal. So this is kind of like a gratitude journal, which you've probably all heard about. So the idea of an awe journal is that you just on a regular basis, you just jot down a description of those moments when something has evoked a feeling of awe. Like you might write down at the grocery store today, you know, that night you just write down a few words about that. Or you'd write down about in the airplane today, I saw this baby and it made me think about maybe I'll be a father someday. and you focus on the sensory details. And so in some of these research studies, scientists have asked people to keep an awe journal. And they've discovered that they found out that people generally, it's common for people to have 2 or 3 experiences of everyday awe a week. So it wasn't, you know, it's not that uncommon. And in fact, if you do this, you probably might have more. You definitely have you're going to become more mindful, and it's maybe going to lead to a richer life. So that's one idea, an awe journal. And the second idea is an awe outing. And this suggestion was, I found this on that Greater Good Science Center on their website. And you could find a description of it if you just Google awe outing. So the idea here is you go to someplace outside. It's good if you go someplace you haven't been before. And it can be a natural setting or an urban setting. And turn off your cell phone. Don't bring it with you at all. And then you start by taking a deep breath. And then once you get going, you just open up your senses, all of your senses. And you open it up to things around you that are vast or unexpected or surprising, or that give you delight. And then you take another deep breath. And then you let your attention explore what it was that inspired awe as you were looking around. Was it the vast landscape? Was it you know, the way the light struck something? And then you can take another deep breath. And then they said, ask yourself some far-fetched questions. What's new? What's unexplored about this? Let your mind wonder a little bit, because awe often leads to wonder. And it can be a source of inspiration. Awe is a source of inspiration for art and science and poetry. So that's what an awe outing would be like. So what I've done tonight, I hope, is try to convince you that awe is a vocabulary word that Zen could embrace, even though it doesn't right now. And it's something you might want to think about and put it in your practice toolbox. And I don't think it's gonna. We have this list of 6 paramitas that people talk about. I don't expect they're going to turn it into 7 paramitas and add awe to it. But if they did, it would be awesome. So that's my talk for tonight. And thanks. And you have a chance to either hear some more stories, or some more comments, or some more questions. We've got quite a few minutes left.
Randy, I have a question.
Yeah.
So related to your last talk about how like meditation can calm the amygdala, is there any relationship between like an awe-inspiring moment and activity in the amygdala? Have they looked at that?
Well, one thing kind of related to that I was going to talk about, but there wasn't time. There's the neuroscientists. There's a region of the brain called the default mode network, which is the region of the brain which is associated with egocentricity and self-referential thinking and daydreaming and mulling about the past or worrying about the future. And that region of the brain, default mode network, is during experiences of awe, that region of the brain gets activated less. So you think about the self less. And it's also in meditation, that also happens. So there's a similarity to there. So I suppose it might be true about the amygdala as well. But I didn't come across that specifically with respect to the amygdala, but neuroscientists are looking at these things.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention, I also saw the total eclipse in Cleveland, Ohio, during Lake Erie, and agreed, whole group of people, and everyone was saying, wow, and so it was an experience that was enhanced by being with a community of people experiencing the same thing. So that was very cool. But I'm gonna kind of expand, I think, what you're talking about in terms of awe.
Go ahead.
Certainly, I've had experiences like that in nature. The mountains would be a great example of that. But when I was in college, I dropped acid, and the same kinds of experiences that you're talking about here, opening up the mind, having an experience of, selflessness, boundarylessness, and my life really changed as a result of that, kind of in a similar way, maybe even in a greater way. And I grew up in a home of Jewish Holocaust survivors. Both of my parents were in Auschwitz.
Wow.
And a few years ago, I visited there, and there are tours where you go and tour the grounds, and there's an opportunity to go up to a watchtower, and you can survey the scale of the grounds, and that just took my breath away. Like, I had grown up hearing stories about my parents and their families and all that stuff, but to be in that physical space and to see the scale and the scope of human destruction and evil, that to me was an awesome experience. So awe obviously does not have to be, not to disparage, but it doesn't always have to be kittens and rainbows.
Yeah. That's, I decided to leave that out, but that's talked about.
Yeah,
There's a terror aspect to it.
Yeah, I held back on bringing that up,
No,
but I
thank
think
you,
it's
thank you for bringing that up.
important to talk about, because we don't here in our environment, we don't experience things like that very often or ever.
Yeah,
But lots of people in the world do.
yeah,
So.
I think in the book he talks about like the atomic bomb. It's like an example of awe, or like he said more. And I think he talked about the 8. You mentioned the 8, and I was
Yes.
I don't know if you now mentioned them all, but like I think one was collective effervescence, which I loved.
yes.
Like, I just love how that sounds, but it's also like, when groups of people experience something together and like the energy of the group.
Like being at a
it's
rock
awesome.
concert or something and all jumping up and down, or
Or dancing, or
collective
yeah.
effervescence is a word, yeah.
And then I don't know, I was wondering what the 8 were. I was trying to remember. Art, I think, music.
Art, in a religious context. Well, I'm looking at the titles here. Sacred Geometries is the title of one of the chapters.
That's okay.
Yeah, anyway, but
It's like the 8, yeah, they're fun.
yeah.
But it's a good point about, force.
Yeah,
Didn't
we're looking at
cry,
a
have
city
all
where
those, yeah.
tornadoes come through,
Yeah.
or a hurricane.
Disasters.
But I mean, to that point, like I was in New York for 9/11, and like we were weird way, I was glad I was there because I did see such kindness. Like I had a different experience of people watching on TV, because like I was struck by later when I saw it on TV, it felt so different when you were there. Because I think people around just became aware of human beings, you know, and kind of being selfless.
Mhm.
You know, there were like lines for the payphones and people were like assessing who was the person who needed to contact somebody the most, or you know, people were trapped in the city, like you couldn't like come into the city or leave or whatever, and it was like people concerned about where we're gonna go, and it was really awe-inspiring, not the destruction, I mean, in some way, but more like how people showed up for one another, and
For
that
humanity.
humanity, it's like
Mhm.
totally awe-inspiring.
Yeah, we went from the Holocaust to 9/11, hitting all the high points,
That's part of life too.
yeah.
Hey, Randy,
Yeah,
thanks so much for your talk. It was great. I love it.
thanks, Deb.
So one of the things I've noticed about an awe experience is like, I went to an opera and I could care less for opera. And this is Carmen, and I really don't like Carmen. But the two people sitting next to me were such enthusiasts and so in awe of this performance that it was contagious almost. And I've had other experiences where I'm not really fond of something, but someone else is. Do they talk about awe being contagious?
Well, it's maybe a little bit like this collective effervescence, being in the presence with others. You know, like if you're there's something different about being at a sporting event in person than watching it on TV. You know, when the touchdown comes and everybody jumps up and down, or a live music event.
Or it can be just one other person appreciating something that opens your eyes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how that relates to Zen, but I think it must someplace.
Well, you know, we have this thing called sympathetic joy, which is one of the four immeasurables, right? So that's in a way what it is, right?
Yeah.
You're glad about someone else's experience of joy.